So anyone who wishes not to be recorded, please turn off your video if you don't want your video on record. First on agenda is public comments, and this is the opportunity for members of the public to comment, question, or share a concern. And as a reminder, just please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, and we may not respond directly to your comment or question during this meeting, but a note will be taken, and if it needs follow-up, we will follow through, or it will come up on an item on the agenda. So member of the public, is there, raise your hand if you wish to make a comment. Okay, Steve, yes, Steve Olvey making a comment. Go ahead. Oops, got to turn your mute.
There we go. Good morning to all of you, and it's just a wonderful thing to see you and be able to participate for a short while in an adult conversation about something that is close to our hearts here, and not worrisome. So topic not worrisome, that's a wonderful thing. And I wanted to say that you're going to really miss Judy. She's always been such a smiling, wonderful face and helpful and hardworking person there, just as nearly the entire staff since I've been around here at Land Bank has been, but she's great. I'll miss her. And I want to thank Tanya or whoever for putting together the agenda where we could just come into the Zoom that way and not bother her before the meeting. I think that's a much better way to go. On a more serious note, I guess two things. One is that I realize it may not be on your agenda at all to speak about, but I brought up last meeting or the meeting before that some concerns about the water rights at Zylstra, and you folks followed up with a very helpful discussion. And I just wondered whether or not there's been further policy analysis or a look at how a policy could be developed to ensure that the land bank gets the greatest, most secure water rights at Zylstra possible. And the other comment is more of a wide open comment that I know you won't want to discuss. And that is, I'm so happy that there's so much money flowing now into your coffers and that of the affordable housing. And I also hope that in considering purchasing properties, that you continue to do the great work you do and try to connect some of these properties. But I also hope that when the chances come up to purchase wetlands or lakes or property that lends itself to deer hunting, that we always consider duck hunting and deer hunting as a possibility with a new preserve or a new chunk. And I'm not sure exactly what's going on at, the name escapes me right now, but the big over on the middle of the island with the wonderful wetlands there and things. I think that duck hunting is going to be phased out. But I just wanted to throw in that there are a lot of other recreational interests, as with maybe fishing, maybe hunting of sorts, land use, picking things, than just hiking and taking pictures. So I just wanted to throw that in. And again, thank you folks for what you do.
Thank you, Steve, for those comments. I don't think we have time to respond to them, so we will either get to them on an agenda or follow up with you directly. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to make a comment or raise a question? Raise your hand if so. And if your video isn't on, you can virtually raise your hand or just unmute your speaker and I'll know that you want to speak. Okay, so if I'm correct, it appears that we don't have any other members of the public. wishing to speak? Being that we have a few more minutes left for public comments, I'm wondering if anyone wants to give from staff wants to give a short update on the water rights at Zylstra. Are we moving forward, making progress? Just a very short recap.
Sure, I can do that. We have engaged with a water rights attorney to look at the situation with the water rights at Zylstra. So we'll be working with him to try and figure out a way forward. Obviously, we've got some issues down there in that the neighboring farmer really feels like they have the water rights. We don't think that's true on the one hand. On the other hand, we're not really interested in securing water rights and cutting off farmers who may have been using some of that water. So we're trying to piece together exactly what we've got and hopefully come to some agreement with neighbors so that we can share water and satisfy our multiple objectives, like having stream flow, but also having some water for irrigation, obviously having some water in the lakes, or at least especially the upper lake. So we'll be looking to try and pull all of that together. It's not going to be easy, frankly, and probably will be controversial as we work our way forward on it, but that's where we are at this point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lincoln. So next up is to approve the minutes. Does any members of the commission have changes to suggest to the minutes other than grammatical and spelling that you can email directly to staff? Please raise your hand or unmute if you do.
Sandy, I do have one comment, and that is on page 2 of 4. Excuse me. The second to the last line, there's a reference to Lincoln anticipates the donation will be recorded by the end of the year. Since we referenced 2 different separate donations, my suggestion is that we insert the word land before donation in that last sentence.
Okay.
And besides, I just have a few little grammatical things that I will send an email on.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone object to adding the word land to clarify it's a land donation? All right. Anyone else have a clarification or correction to the minutes? Okay, if there are no further corrections, then the minutes are approved. My little quick study of Robert's rules says we don't actually have to take a vote, etc. So if you're okay with that, then we'll just move forward. Minutes are approved with the one change, inserting the word land in front of donation. Moving on, chair and commissioners reports. Do any commissioners want to give a little report to the group? Okay.
Well, Sandy, yes. I guess I'll just mention by way of introduction that you and Lincoln and I and several of the staff members, including Eric, our former staff member, attended the CARTS meeting on the future of Goffeld Farm last night. And I think there were about 50 members of the public there, I think. Well-attended meeting, interesting, good comments. And I think I'll leave it at that because I think it's on the agenda for staff reports later on.
Great. I I echo Brian's comments. It was great to hear from a variety of different people in the public. Any other commissioners have anything to report? Because we're scooting right along here. Okay, then we will go ahead. We're almost 15 minutes early, but let's hear an update from our new council liaison, Christine Minnie. Christine, congratulations on your new position, and we're excited to have you as our liaison and work with you in the future. So you've got the floor.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I can't say that at this point yet I have much of an update. However, I also attended last night's CART meeting, and it was really informative and, as you said, productive with a lot of thoughts and ideas, and I really enjoyed it. I do look forward to being your council liaison, and I came in just a minute late, but did I hear something about Judy, and did it relate to retiring?
It did. I believe this is next week is Judy's last week before she officially retires and goes to 2 days a week. Is that right, Judy?
Yeah, I'm leaving, but I'll be around 2 days a week until the end of the year to work on specific special projects. I won't be doing anything that I'm already doing. Different
Fair
things.
enough. Well, I'm happy and sad to hear that all at the same time.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. So with that, my update is complete.
Okay. Thank you, Christine. Does anyone have any questions for Christine while she's here? So it's not the time for the public to engage officially, but I feel since we are so ahead of schedule that why not allow questions? Steve, you have a question for Councilman Minnie. Go ahead.
Christine, Steve Alvey here on San Juan. I guess the question is a broad one and in kind of a comment, but I would hope that you and the new council, as it's composed now, would carefully help to ensure that the land bank in having lots of revenue these days and things, that the land bank in purchasing properties takes a hard look at our needs in the near future in terms of climate change and being more resilient. And I think you used some of those words in your campaign as well as others. And I think that it is high time to get really serious about what things may be like out here in the next 20 years or so and further on out, and to try to prepare ourselves to be much more independent and resilient across the board. So whether it's power generation, or whether it's growing food, or whether it's some other kind of resource use that we can depend on out here and put some people to work. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you,
Okay.
Steve.
Christine, did you have anything you wanted to respond to that?
If I may, my computer's giving me heck. I'm going to stop my video. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I will be very happy, Steve, to do as you suggested, of course, but I'd also love to have more conversation with you outside of this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Again, yes, am I completely out of order allowing a question?
No, I just wanted to say that, Christine, I think we've started sending you some material. Tanya may have sent you some material from the land bank. So I'll coordinate that with her over the next week to make sure that you have pertinent documents that and background.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so we have one other person with their hand up. We have time for a short comment or question directed to Christine only, and only in the context of a land bank, her role as a land bank liaison. So if you have something quick that you'd like Christine to hear from you, then go ahead. And that would be Kathy Morris, hand raised. Keep it short, please. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Kathy Morris from Orcas Island, and I just want to make direct and encourage Christine to have the members of the council who were not at the CART meeting last night. It was recorded, and specifically Bruce Gregory from the Land Bank. He gave a great speech. He prepared it about the importance of soil health, and it also goes to Steve Alvey's comments about climate change and resilience, and to take a deep dive and look at ways people are sequestering carbon in agricultural land, and the role that carbon plays in climate change mitigation. So again, Bruce Gregory's talk, it's in the CART meeting, it's towards the end, and to take a deep dive in carbon sequestration. Thank you.
Thank you. It was great. I agree with you.
Okay, so thank you for that comment, Kathy. And let's go ahead and move on to financial update on the agenda. Judy, I believe Judy handles that. Oops,
Thanks. For January, we never have much to report. I did provide all of the Land Bank Commission members and Christine the REIT summary, real estate excise tax collections through the end of 2020. This hasn't been audited yet or reviewed. It's 5.6 million before or after the 1% administration fee was taken out. And then it, of course, will be 1% higher than that after it's put in. I haven't double checked this, but I believe this is the highest REIT the Land Bank has experienced in its 30-year history. The other thing, I think there's going to be a discussion today financially about the transfer of funds to the stewardship endowment. I'm not sure, Lincoln, were you going to lead that discussion? Are there any questions at this point from the commission might have for me?
Kathy, I see your hand raised, but we're not going to take any questions, but you may just have your hand raised left over. So
No, don't unmute, don't unmute.
So any members of the commission have questions for Judy about the financial reports that she sent over?
Actually, sorry, I'm focusing better now on the agenda. We will be having an amended budget in the first quarter of 2021, which is typical, and to adjust the beginning cash balances to include the Kaufelt Farm Stewardship Management Plan, and then followed that in this meeting will be a discussion of the Stewardship Endowment. So if the Land Bank Commission decides to change the budgeted amount of the endowment, that first amended budget would be the time to do that.
Judy, I think we're also likely to have some changes regarding acquisitions. new acquisitions are actually, I'm going to talk about one that's budgeted already, but we're going to need to change that one. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Okay, so is this the point that, so the financial update is complete. We're moving on to director's report.
And Sam,
Lincoln,
I have
yes,
a quick request of Judy.
Yes.
Or a question anyway. Looking at the brightly colored graph of our month-to-month performance over the last however many years, I always enjoy looking at that, and I think it's suitable for framing. Great piece. But it occurred to me looking at it, since this is our highest revenue year, the thing that's really significant to me when I look at it is year-end revenue. And I realized that that is the last dot at the right-hand side of the second graph. But I wonder if we could set a new precedent by just graphing that point. In other words, the December year-end revenue for each year, one simple line to see how that trends. Does that make sense? Any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure what you mean. This report is generated for you monthly, so
Right.
it keeps track of how it's going. So
Okay.
then it's year to date at the end of that month, and then it compares it to, well, I guess we have 10 years on here at this point. But we could talk. Why don't we talk after the meeting?
Okay.
That'd be great.
okay, Lincoln, yes, go ahead.
Brian, are you just looking for a year-to-year graph? Is that what you're talking about?
Right.
Oh,
Just a trend of the December year-end revenues for each of those years.
I can have that ready for February.
Super.
Thank you. Okay, so nothing else in the financial realm, is that right? We're way ahead of schedule, so that's not a bad thing. Directors,
Sandy,
yes,
I know that at the last meeting and a few meetings before that, the commission's raised this question about wanting to talk about the stewardship endowment. So I thought it might make sense for us to just have a discussion at this point. I don't think any decision would be made until March comes along and we come back with an amended budget. But if people are wanting to talk about that, this probably is a good time.
if I could make a suggestion as I'm feeling my way through this. And I learned today that we are not held to Robert's rules, but I did learn a little bit about them. And I wonder if we should follow the part that we don't just talk about things, but someone maybe make a motion and then we move forward and then have a discussion. This is just throwing it out there as a possibility, as a way to move the meeting forward in the future. This particular time, we have ample time on the schedule. So Lincoln, did you want to begin that discussion by reporting anything in relation to the stewardship and endowment fund, where we're at? Looking forward.
Sure, I can start the conversation. You've all got projections, and the issue here really is the question of arriving at the end of 2026 and not having the REIT collection reauthorized. And so what that means for our stewardship program. We've set money aside in a quote unquote endowment. We've also created arrangements with the Preservation Trust on a couple of different properties to help us with stewardship costs there. Right now, we're slated to end 2026 with the current contributions to stewardship. I think that will put us at about, I think it's 6 million. Judy, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have that right in front of me. But we would also have another million in cash. I think that's right. Yeah, so we would also have another million in cash. We'd have 6.3 million plus another million in cash in the stewardship fund in general. Excuse me.
I wonder, Lincoln, would it be easy for you to pull that chart up as a screen share so that also members of the public could see it as you're discussing it and we're discussing it? If it's not an easy couple of clicks, don't worry about it.
Take me a little while to get to it. Judy
Okay.
may be better able to do that than
Yeah,
me.
I can pull that up. I just wanted to mention that the county actually doesn't close 2020 until today. So they still haven't posted the current transfer. So I don't have, as of today, I don't have current numbers for the amount that I've asked them to transfer. But I'll work on, I can pull up this spreadsheet in just a second here.
Right, so I'm talking about the spreadsheet that we looked at the last meeting, I'm pretty sure, which shows trends out to 2026. And that's for the Stewardship and Management Fund. For the Conservation Area Fund, we're currently slated to end up with a cash balance of basically 6.5. However, that doesn't include the fact that we budgeted this year for 4 million in REIT and we're at 5.6. So really up around 8 as a projection for the Conservation Area Fund. So just getting back to the question at hand, this idea of having enough money in the stewardship fund to go forward. And I think the basic problem here is that we'd done this with the assumption that our stewardship fund might function similarly to an endowment fund that a private organization might hold. However, our reality is that our investment options are extremely limited. And so realistically, you can see this up on the screen now. This is just a scenario we ran with the idea that we're starting with 10 million in cash and having 4 stewards going forward from that point in time. That interest revenue we've got at 1%, which seems kind of realistic. You know, at some points in the past, it's been significantly higher, but I think we're in a prolonged period of very low interest rates. And for us, you know, the things that we can invest in really getting more than 1% will be a challenge. And so that leaves us in the dilemma that we will never be able to keep up with inflation, basically. That inflation is going to proceed at probably 3% a year, something like that. So we'll always be losing money out of that fund regardless of what we do, short of not spending any money. And what this shows basically is a projection of how many years we'd have with this, with 4 staff people and management and maintenance budget, which includes vehicles and things. And so that really what it's showing is that at some point in year 15, we'd be out of money. And I just wanted to make that point because it's, I think, important to recognize that one of the original goals of the land bank was to set up this fund so that it would steward properties in perpetuity. However, at the time that was created, the stewardship fund, our biggest revenue earner generally has been the local government investment pool. And so prior to 2007, getting 4 or 5% in LGIP was routine, but we haven't seen anything close to that since then. So it's changed the game and created a situation where it's not possible for us to set aside enough money basically to go on in perpetuity. So I think it's important to recognize that. And I think it's also important to recognize the fact that this fund exists in the context of other county funds. And at this point, we are, I'm pretty confident, Judy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty confident we're significantly above any other county fund in terms of the amount of money we've got. I think the road fund might have a few million in it. Don't quote me on that, but you know, with us sitting on this much cash, it's very confusing to people, and it's also tempting to people when the county's struggling for paying for other things, and then the land bank has a big fund set aside. That, coupled with the fact that we can't keep up with inflation on it, means that I think it's probably important for us to take a deeper look at this whole question. And I'm not sure what the implications are there. I would suggest, frankly, that we have maybe the commission wants to have a subcommittee just to look at this in more detail.
Lincoln, this is Jim. Can you hear me?
Barely.
Barely. Okay. I just want to say that, first of all, I want to ask, why isn't there a hard firewall against raiding land bank funds that are there for a particular reason within county government? Why isn't there a hard firewall?
Well, there is and there isn't, in the sense that the county provides services to us and they charge us for those services like IT.
Yep.
And also, excuse me, the county does have a facilities group. And so, for example, one of the things that's happened in the Parks Department is that the facilities group has taken over more and more of doing parks maintenance as opposed to parks staff doing it. So we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but something like that is conceivable where pretty much we shrink land bank staff and it becomes facilities who's doing a lot of this maintenance. And so the funds would go to pay them. That's a hypothetical, but you know, it could definitely happen.
Okay, is there any mechanism in the legislation, either locally or with the state, to find a domicile, so to speak, outside of LGIP? I mean, do we cross any thresholds when, if in fact the REIT gets, you know, the legislation sunsets and we change, there's got to be a way to, well, maybe there's not got to be, but hopefully there would be some mechanism for us to sequester these funds for their true purpose. Seems like any kind of small focus group or subcommittee that's going to work on this would hopefully look for some sort of mechanism on that level. But there's got to be some way we can sequester these funds for their purpose in as long as they last from any kind of rating.
Yeah, I think it's largely protected, but I think you can understand the context that if we have a $10 million fund or $15 million fund and people look at the county budget presentation and the other funds are, you know, in the 1 or 2 million or less, and people start asking the question of, you know, what's going on? You've got all this money and you're not using it.
We can explain to them that it's
defensible. It's defensible, but it's going to create a very tense situation, I would say.
Hey, Lincoln, can I ask, I'm a little bit slow here. So is the purpose of this spreadsheet exercise to demonstrate what would happen were REIT to end, or is it just to say sort of in preparation for more competition within county funds as county funds might tend to dry up? Or I guess what would be the initiative that would start this if it's not business as usual?
No, the idea of this spreadsheet is just to show if there were no REIT being collected and we had this much expenditure for stewardship. And that's another question. We might not have this many people, or, I mean, this is a pretty much bare bones budget, I would say. But it's just to show what would happen to that fund over time, given the fact that we're really limited in what we can invest in. But the costs are hard costs, so we'll be confronting them.
Judy, can you flip back so I can see the whole screen? I don't know if I have a way to do that, so I can see if someone in the commission has their hand raised.
Judy, it looks like you have to stop sharing your screen.
So, Lincoln, are you putting this out there for our review and discussion and suggesting a subcommittee? Is that what I'm understanding? And along with that, are you making a recommendation? Are you recommending anything, or just
Yeah,
putting it out there?
I don't know that I have a recommendation at this point. I think it's worth discussion. It's also the other element in this, quite honestly, is the fact that setting aside, you know, we could set aside all the funds that we have into stewardship potentially. That may be a self-fulfilling prophecy when we come around to a renewal vote again. The last time around, it was certainly an issue, even with maybe, I forget how much money we had in the stewardship fund, maybe 3 million, something like that. But certainly people seized on that idea to make the argument that we really don't need to collect any more REIT. So it's just something that is worth considering and talking about.
You know, Lincoln, I agree with getting together a small group and pursuing this, because this is the first time that I have seen any attempt to do a projection out here like this. We've had a lot of discussions about this, and what I would suggest is that maybe we get together a small group and come back maybe by the March meeting and have a further discussion of this, because I have some questions about some of the premises of the chart that you came up with, some
Sure.
questions with regard to the interest rate, because the interest rate in the last 7 years we have been over 1% in 3.5 of the years in the last 7 years. So I think that there's some things that need further discussion, especially also with regard to the number of land stewards that would be needed. You basically with the benefits, it's 150, starting off $115,000 a year for each one of them. And it seems to me that this really needs some further discussion. And the last part is, it's kind of a question of the balance that we talked about before with regard to acquisitions versus stewardship. In other words, we take money from acquisitions and put it in stewardship, we can't purchase as much property. And I think that that's a really fundamental issue. And I know that Jim Skog and I have both suggested we'd like to see the stewardship funds go up. But given your chart, my preference is to put this off for a few months and take a closer study of it. And I suggest as financial officer, I'd like to be involved. I think Jim has very strong feelings, and I think he would want to be involved too. And I don't know who else.
Yes. I would. David Mylan looks like.
Krista has her hand raised to participate.
Well, there you go.
Okay,
Andy?
yes.
I would like to second Doug's comments. I think if we're going to look at this, really there are a number of different scenarios that we should play out and present to the commission. There are a lot of ways to slice this pie. And we talk about it every year about the balance between the conservation and stewardship funds. There are a number of ways that could be done, including, it seems to me, that balance could be completely flexible year to year based on REIT revenues and need. So I think the doomsday scenario of non-renewal of the REIT in 2026 doesn't need to necessarily pay out. Also, my question for Lincoln in terms of your comments is, you talk about the stewardship fund being a target, but it seems to me, if I'm not missing anything, that the total that we have in both funds is the total that we have anyway, and that's going to be the target, not just the stewardship fund.
Well, I would agree with that, and I think it would be a mistake to amass a lot of money in the conservation area fund. The whole goal of the program is to do conservation work, so that's what we need to do.
I have a quick comment. I don't think 4 of us can work on that. It creates a quorum, I believe. So
Can we, so let's see how many people raised their hand. Doug, I definitely think you as the financial. So then there's 2 others from San Juan Island. Is there a desire to have a different island represented? I don't know that really matters.
I think it would be fun.
Krista, all right.
Yeah, please. If David doesn't mind, or he can arm wrestle with Jim, but it would be nice to have spread out that a little bit.
I agree with that. I'm quite willing with both Jim and David to caucus with them and certainly spend some time with them and get their views. But I do think that it might be helpful to have representatives from the 3 main islands.
So Brian, would you be willing to do that from our area? So the committee would be Krista, Brian, and Doug. Doug representing what Jim and David have in mind.
Yes, I guess, Sandy, if you want to exclude yourself from that as here, which might be appropriate, I'd be glad to step in.
And let me add this for Jim and David. There may be, let's be flexible in terms of the membership. It may be a time that one of them could speak on behalf of San Juan Island.
You could also divide it up into have two subcommittees, like 2 groups of 3, which just call them different things and don't have them interact. And
Yeah. I don't know. So do we have an actual concrete charge for this committee that we can state here? It would be a financial subcommittee to consider the future of the stewardship fund in the feasibility of setting it up for stewarding in perpetuity. Is that what we're after here?
Well, I think what we're after are options. And I think that we need to look at a number of different factors. One is somehow figuring out a way to create, if not discover some existing firewall to protect those funds or some mechanism. And another thing that I think needs to happen is to well, in general, just figure out what we need, what we're gonna need. But I don't want to just give up the idea of putting additional money into stewardship because we think somebody's gonna, from the county's gonna steal it later on. That just seems not right. But I'm willing to take a back seat, but I'm also willing to chime in whenever needed.
It seems to me that all options ought to be open in terms of the discussion. And part of that is an option that we put a lot more money into stewardship, or the option that we stop putting money into stewardship. I mean, it seems to me that what we need to do is use Lincoln's memo kind of maybe as a basis for our approach, but leave everything open so that, you know, there's nothing that we rule out immediately.
David, go ahead.
So is there a way that we can get more clarity on what the, you know, Jim's using the term firewall. Is there a firewall or what is there, and who could give us a better explanation of that? Would that be maybe John Kane or somebody else? I mean, I have no concept of how that might play out in the future and what the legislation says about that. I've wondered that myself a lot recently as the rate has been so high and the county budget has been so strained. You know, how does that work? I don't know how that works.
I think it requires a change, a legislative change to make those funds actually accessible because they are designated by law. And I think the same applies to the 2% for tourism, those types of things. The law can be changed. And there was talk early in COVID that some of our representatives were looking at which of those designated or hands-off pockets might be accessed on a temporary basis through COVID. So the firewall exists, but it exists as long as there isn't a strong focus on rewriting the law. So I think from day to day, it is our money. And I think Lincoln's talking more about the perspective of what it looks like if you have that much money sitting around and the justification of that, which I think this committee can work on that. you know, you save money to protect assets, but I think the legislation is there right now, but doesn't mean it can't, the law can't be changed.
So
Oh.
the,
I guess-
well,
So if,
This is
if,
fair.
if I can put a hold on it so that we stay on track here, we have formed a finance subcommittee. Please come back to us, would you say by the March meeting with some various options of scenarios that we can then dig in further?
I'm fine with that as long as we realize that we just may come back and say, here's where we are.
Yeah,
'Cause
okay.
it's a difficult issue.
Yeah, you just report back to us. Okay, sounds good. Next on the agenda is the director's report. So Lincoln, you have the floor.
Right. I wanted to talk about a few of our acquisition projects. And I'm going to share my screen here. Yes, share. So I'm going to throw this one out there to begin with. If you remember, we've talked about this and we've budgeted for this project. This is acreage attached to Lopez Hill Preserve. And this is property that the Lopez Community Land Trust has purchased, and they're looking to resell. They would be retaining this area here, which has this agricultural field, and trying to create probably a couple of agricultural homesteads here. But we would end up with this part of the property, which all makes a lot of sense. As you can see, it's quite wet through here. Also, just it makes a lot of sense on a number of different levels, and we've talked about that. What I'm raising at this point is that the Lopez Community Land Trust really has additional costs, which I don't think they had fully factored in when we came up with a price originally of $9,000 an acre. So their hope is that we would be agreeable to purchasing 75 acres instead of 70 acres and at $9,500 an acre. And again, the idea here is that the Preservation Trust would purchase a conservation easement probably next year. So we get 50% of that back. But I just wanted to float that out there to make sure people were okay with it. I think we're still well under market value, quite honestly, with this. So I don't see that as a problem. And I do see this as a really important project for us to move forward on. So I would just throw that open.
So is this something that, so if I'm understanding correctly, it's already in the budget and you're looking for a budget adjustment?
Right. It's in the budget at 630,000 now. So we'd have to increase that budget to probably 720 or something like that. And again, we would outlay the funds. We would close in the first quarter of this year. That's the goal. And then the Preservation Trust, who's got their board is voting on this month. I think their acquisition committee has already approved it, so they're pretty committed to it. But they would need to raise money to come up with their portion. So they'd want a year or something like that to do that. So we'd expect to get that payment for that conservation easement a year from now.
Okay, does somebody, commissioner, want to make a a motion so that we can have a second and have discussion, or is that how this should go? Sorry, feeling my way here for the first time.
I'll move to, this is Miles, I'll move to increase the budget for this purchase from 630,000 to 720,000.
Second.
Is there, okay. Any discussion to be had on this? Anyone have further discussion?
Yeah, this is Doug. I'm a little bit concerned about the total price if the Preservation Trust does not come in. So my preference was not make a commitment until we get a commitment from the Preservation Trust that they're going to go forward with this, because I don't have a problem with the project at this price if we're paying 50%, but I do have a little bit of a problem at this price for this acquisition if we are stuck with the full amount.
Yeah,
That would
we
be-
should have confirmation of that after their next board meeting, I'm pretty sure, and certainly before we would move forward to close on the property.
Yes, Krista.
So the question is then, because you mentioned that the funding would not return or come back from the trust until maybe 2022 after fundraising, but I agree with Doug in terms of getting some kind of a commitment from them, an agreement that that conservation easement will be purchased, and the intent maybe is to do it through fundraising, but if that doesn't happen, that the funds will be made available. I think that's what Doug's looking for. That's what I would be looking for.
That's correct, Krista.
If that's possible.
Yeah, with other projects, we've done a cooperative agreement. So this is what we've got now for the Davis Bay Farm property on Richardson Marsh. We have it for the Beaverton Valley property, the Taylor purchase, and both of those we're looking to wrap up hopefully in the next few weeks. But that's the mechanism has been for us to create a cooperative agreement between the organizations.
So, Madam Chair.
Yes, yes.
That's case, I'd like to propose an amendment to Doug's comment and make Miles' motion of acquisition of the property contingent upon having an agreement from the Preservation Trust.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Anyone have a comment to further discuss that? Okay,
think
so go ahead. I was going to repeat the motion.
I kind of think Miles has to agree to the amendment of his motion. Otherwise, he retracts the motion and we rewrite it, I think.
I don't think that's true, Krista.
Okay, I'm just throwing it out there. That's what pops into my head.
Let's make sure Miles agreed.
Yeah, how do you feel, Miles?
Thanks, Ryan. I agree. I think it's a good amendment.
Okay, so the proposed amended motion is that we authorize the increase in expenditure from 630,000 to 720,000 for this Lopez piece. I don't have the name in front of me.
The Smith property.
The Smith property, as long as we receive commitment from the San Juan Preservation Trust that their 50% will be available and paid to us in 2022. Does that sound correct? Yes?
Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The amended motion has passed. All right, back to you, Lincoln.
So these other projects, I'll just mention what's going on. That with the Spencer Spit donation, we did close on that. I think I let you all know that. So that project is concluded. We'll be working with state parks on some kind of management agreement for it. And the Davis Bay Farm project, where we're purchasing 24 acres subject to a preservation trust conservation easement. They're still working through the final details of that with the family to orchestrate the sale both of the underlying fee and conservation easement. And we're expecting that will happen in the next couple of weeks. We thought we would get that one done by the end of the year, but there was a real log jam with the title company. So we're thinking that'll happen pretty quickly. Same thing with the Barker donation. We haven't quite wrapped that up, but hopefully that'll happen before the next meeting. And also following that, since that's a requirement to do the conservation easement sale to the trust on that property and the Taylor property also. We think we'll have all of those done by the next meeting. I've got one more project, but we need to talk about that in executive session.
Okay, so any questions from the commission on those project updates that Lincoln just gave?
Yes. Before we leave this, I'd like to bring in another one. I thought that we were going to discuss Kaufeld Farm under the director's report. It was on the agenda, but I just realized it was under the agenda on the financial discussion, and we didn't have it. So I just wanted to point out that the Kaufeld Farm lease is something that's coming up sometime within the next 12 months on our work agenda. We ought soon, I think, to be expecting a final report from the CART. And so anticipating that, I think it's something that the commission is going to work on. And I would suggest that we need another subcommittee at some point to start looking at the lease arrangements.
To to look at the recommendations from CART and
yeah.
make recommendations of their recommendations. Is that what?
Yeah, the way I see it is it's kind of a two-step process. First of all, the commission needs to hear the recommendations from CART in the form of a report and a presentation. And the commission, I think as a whole, needs to make some hard decisions and set what amounts to our agricultural policy. And it's not real clear to me to what extent that relates to all of our agricultural policies or just Kaufeld Farm Preserve. But the real question, where the rubber meets the road, is going to be our financial commitment to the future of Kaufeld Farm. And I think that we really need to look at a bunch of factors and make some hard decisions. So it's going to be a process, and we need some folks, I think, to focus on that and help inform the commission's decision.
Thank you, Brian. Is your suggestion to go ahead and form the committee now and then wait for these numbers and recommendations to come in from CART?
Yeah, we have to wait for the recommendations to come in. No, I'm just trying to put it on
Our radar.
agenda. I don't think we need to form the committee now, but
okay.
We should begin thinking about it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions about the director's report? Okay, then we are going to go ahead and take our break. We're a few minutes early. We're going to reconvene at, well, let's come back at 9:50. Does that sound good, everybody? All right, see you back at 9:50. Here we go. Next up.
So this is the moment where we talk about Judy.
Yay!
When she's here, that is, yeah. Judy's officially retiring, but will be staying on in a different capacity. However, this is the official thing. So I thought it would be really appropriate for us to just spend some time on this. She's been here for, what is it, 13 years, Judy? Is that right? Something like
Right.
that.
Yeah, 13 and a half at this point. You never want to say 13.
So she came on board at a time when the county was really undergoing a lot of change, particularly with financial stuff, and things had been done pretty loosely. But Mylene Henley had come aboard as auditor, and I'll tell you what, if we hadn't somewhat surreptitiously, not surreptitiously, that's not the word, serendipitously hired Judy, I don't know what we would have done, quite honestly, because I don't think there are too many people who have her ability to deal with these issues, and more importantly, who actually had a relationship with Mylene. I'm pretty sure Mylene's a little scared of Judy. So that really worked to our advantage. And it's been amazing, to see her over the years. Really just, she's the person who fights for us probably more than anybody, just to make sure that everything is right. I know I frustrate her sometimes because I make statements and I do estimates of things, and she always kind of looks at me like, so she has to run the numbers. But I'm not sure what else to say. She's been the key to this place working for so long. And it's going to be a really
looks like she's still going to work there 2 days a week.
That's good. That's the saving grace of this whole thing, that she's still going to be around. It also will give us an opportunity
1
maybe
year
to have a party later on this year when we can do such things. So I'm looking forward to that, but it's going to be a really tough thing. We're going to miss having you to take charge of us, Judy.
Thank you. It's been a big part of my life and my career. And actually, Mylene Henley is one of the two people that called me up and said, there's this job at the land bank, you really need to apply for it. The other one was a land bank commissioner, Lisa Lawrence. So I actually have to send both of them thank you notes.
Judy, I missed the part where you were describing what your special projects are.
Oh, we had applied for a grant with the Secretary of State, and they have certain guidelines and the archives. So we're going to follow their guidelines and organize things. And many of the things that have to do with the land bank the originals will be sent to the Secretary of State archivist office up in Bellingham, and they preserve these things, the physical things, and then we will also digitize certain documents and records so that they'll be more accessible to the public.
Great.
So this is part of the Public Records Act, Public Records Act, and so I'll be doing that and then helping with the transition with the new person.
Great. So there's something on the screen. Who wants to talk about that?
Oh, I will.
Yeah.
So Judy, the staff, as you well know, we don't want you to go, but we're grateful for all the time that you have spent supporting us. And in a way, it's kind of appropriate that this gift, this rose that we have ordered for you special for your Frog Prince garden, will arrive sometime in mid-May. So maybe by then we will be able to present it to you in person in a gathering. But it's just a small token of our appreciation and the support you've given us over all this time. I mean, I'm sure Erin's going to be great, but your seat, your shoes will be really hard to fill. Luckily, you live on my island and I can harass you.
Oh, I hope so.
Outside of the office.
I look forward to it.
Oh yeah.
Well, this is really I would start to say ironic, but it's full circle. I never had roses in my garden until I moved to the land bank, and we knew that down there along the street, among the bramble of weeds and blackberries, there were some rose bushes. So that's been a project too over the years, is to try to resurrect those roses that were along the front.
Well, that's partially why you're getting a rose. Wink, wink.
Very funny.
We know things here. We're paying
Okay,
attention.
good. Yeah, and I love the
Yeah.
color. It's
Thank
beautiful.
you for that.
I will find a place for it at Frog Prince Gardens for sure. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, Judy, this is Doug. I just, I can't let it go without just extending, great thanks in a public way. It's just been phenomenal support, resource, everything. And, outside of just that professional relationship, I think everybody here loves you. You've just been really steady and marvelous. So thank you so much. And I'm really glad that you're kind of just partially going away and that you'll have all these hours open for volunteering.
Right.
And last, I want to check in real quick. And did you get a clearing and grading permit to go into the storage unit? You might need to check with community development about that.
I know. Well, those two new field assistants you hired. So I'm glad they're both so young. They at least have a driver's license. Yeah.
I think
Oops,
We can't hear you, Lincoln.
just lost you.
Yeah. No, we're going to clean out that storage unit. Have you ever seen those TV shows, Storage Wars, or and we're probably going to find really valuable maps in there.
We should have people bid on it.
Yeah, that is definitely, yeah. It's all public domain, let me tell you. Invite the public over.
Well, and there was that intern who went away and we never found, maybe, who knows?
Mhm.
So Judy, as a commissioner, I also felt that your support for us has just been tremendous over the years. I mean, we couldn't do our job without all the support that you have provided us, and we're going to miss you.
Yeah, and I echo those comments. Doug and I are the oldest members of the commission, I guess. I don't mean that in terms of our age, but in terms of our age on the commission. All of those years shared with you, and in your support, I probably would. I think I would say that you're a bedrock of the institution, and I just can't thank you enough.
You're very welcome. It's been a joy and a pleasure.
All right, come on, let's have some more praise.
Hey,
Well,
Judy.
I will say as not the oldest commissioner, but one of the older ones now, I guess. What struck me the most when I first came on the commission, besides how little I knew, was Judy's generosity of time and interest in helping me learn more about the land bank in general, but obviously all the financial complexities of it. And you were just so gracious and so fun. And finance isn't my strength, but it's one of those things, if you don't work on it, you don't learn it. But you were very generous of time, and we laughed, and I learned a lot, and I just felt like I could come to you without feeling, I might have felt stupid, but you never made me feel stupid. And that was a great gift, because it does give courage to speak up when you're looking at things. So you were a good mentor, and I appreciate that.
I do like to laugh.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you got to. When you work with numbers, you got to take a break.
Judy, can I speak? Can the public speak?
I think
it's Eileen. I just want to thank you for mentioning going to meetings. I'll be standing out on our road waiting for you to pick me up.
We're almost neighbors, aren't we, Eileen? Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Yeah.
Nancy, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Judy, I just want to say that your being involved with the land bank helped me sleep well at night. I knew that every Friday when we had a meeting and I would show up, that things were going to be solid. And I do mean solid. You covered every detail. You had all the facts kind of at your fingertips when we needed information. And you had a great sense of humor. I love your spirit, and I really think the land bank is really done some amazing things, and a lot of it's thanks to you. I'll miss you.
Thanks, Nancy.
One thing I love about Judy is the support that you provide is so quick. Last night going into the Kaufelt meeting, all of a sudden I realized I need numbers. What have we invested in this? I know I have it somewhere, I don't know. And I shoot this email off very late in the day, and 5 minutes later, boom, here it is, comprehensive. And Judy has always just been on the ball, a great source of comfort. It's a very comfortable feeling knowing you're there, and so I'm going to miss that.
Well, I have to tell you, I was always taught by Steve Kennedy and other people probably too, that if I ever got hit by a beer truck, which in Friday Harbor was highly possible, that someone needed to open my files and understand what was going on. So I've always operated with that in mind. So Tanya, you could even just open my files and you could give a financial report.
Tracy, you wanted to say something?
Yes, thank you. And Judy, I know we'll see you in garden circles, but we could not have had a 3-week fundraising campaign to save the Channel Preserve in 3 weeks at the busy holiday time without our multiple calls every day and updating you and you updating us. And my husband, Paul, is sitting here listening too. And between his data and yours and raising well over the $50,000, it changed my life that we could pull that off. But really thanks to you, and that you never barred the door when I came running over to catch you or Lincoln, that even when the phones wouldn't pick up, and I'd show up. And I will certainly, I've appreciated getting to know you and the land bank through that amazing 3 weeks of fundraising.
Well, your husband's a man after my own heart. I mean, anybody that loves spreadsheets as much, you don't find that very often.
All right. No, he worked at the UN to save the world from nuclear inner power, but or nuclear whatever. But the data stuff was pretty amazing to be working as a threesome, and then your follow-up in the ability to reach out to every donor, and the $15, $25 up to the bigger donors. And I know you guys work in millions, and this was just 50,000, but it really made us feel that we could do it. So thank you, Judy. You always had hope in us.
Well, I couldn't have done that without Tanya. It was really two of us at this end.
Yeah, well, thank you. And we'll see you around, I'm sure. But thank you for your years of service and all your answering my questions as well.
You're very welcome.
Christine.
Yes, hi. I can't speak to this with relevance to Land Bank, but I can speak to Judy being a gem of the community and a very consistent part of the last 10 years of my life. Thank you. As most of you don't know, I think my husband has a secret crush on Judy, and you know it.
Two ways.
And I've appreciated all the parts that you've brought to our community and to me. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yes, Tom.
Sandy, I'm sure you want to get going along with this meeting, but I can't. I just have to praise Judy. Fortunately, I was one of the few people that worked with Judy in her prior job before coming to the land bank, and so I knew how good she would be at the land bank, and I agree with what Lincoln was saying. And she put them in quick order, and has absolutely been the rock of land bank for all these years, and it's very much appreciated. Thank you, Judy.
Okay, well, we're glad that you're leaving, but you're not really quite leaving. So great.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you. Lincoln, you wanted to say something at this point before we get into stewardship reports?
Yes, we have two new people who are on the call / in the meeting, who we've hired as field assistants. I don't know, Doug, maybe you want to say a couple words of introduction, and then we'll let them introduce themselves.
Sure. I don't want to steal their thunder. I told them to prepare some PowerPoint presentations for today on their bio and background and history. So yeah, I'm just super excited. Jacob Wagner, who's been on the island here for quite some time, has joined us, and Shauna Barrows, who has some solid experience out here as well with the Washington Conservation Corps. They got started here this week, and it's so far, it's just going great. You know, we started with this crazy windstorm and a power outage, and but you know, I think things have gone really fantastic so far. It feels really great to all of us. It feels like we've been working together for a long time. So I think I'll just hand it over to those two. And maybe before I do that too, I just want to also compliment, we had a little subgroup hiring committee that also just was really high functioning and great. I really appreciate the staff that put the time in. think we ended up with something close to 80 applicants for these positions. So it was quite a bit of work to wade through, and just, yeah, it went really, really well. So really grateful to everybody's effort in that. So we'll hand it over, and I don't know, maybe Shauna, do you want to jump in and go first?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. It's been really nice being here and getting to know all of you and seeing so many new faces via Zoom. This is quite fun. Like Doug said, I just moved to the island. Tuesday was my first day officially here, so it's kind of been this wild transition process of simultaneously getting to know the community and then also getting to know this new job. And oh my gosh, I am so grateful to be involved with such an extraordinary organization that's full of so many clearly passionate people who really care about land conservation and really care about what we're doing out here. I guess a little bit about myself. I grew up just outside of Oakland, California, and I moved up to Washington to go to school at Western Washington University. I have 2 degrees, one's in environmental education and one's in English literature. And I think that those two kind of play together quite well in terms of establishing what my passions are in the world. And I really do care so much about connecting deeply with my environment, with my surroundings, and using that to inform the way in which I move throughout the world. After I graduated from Western, I did 2 years with Washington Conservation Corps, and a lot of the projects ended up being out here on San Juan Island and on Orcas Island and Jones and Vendovi and just all over the place. And during those projects, I felt so deeply connected to the work out here and so deeply connected to the land, and became just so passionate about wanting to give back to this place that felt like it was giving me so much. It felt like it was allowing me to become a new person and restructure my idea of identity and my ideas of conservation and what it sort of meant to be a responsible steward. And then when this job announcement came out, it just seemed like this incredible serendipitous alignment of my pathing up to this point. And now I am here, and today is day 3 of work. And I look forward to this process so much, and just further getting to know everyone involved and just seeing how everything unfolds. And really happy to be here.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jacob. Shauna, thanks for being my buddy in starting a new job. It'll be fun to be working together. And I was lucky enough as a kid to grow up in Colorado, and I lived right next to a really neat county preserve. And so I spent so much of my life over at this preserve it was gigantic, and I grew up exploring it and kind of realized right away that what an amazing gift to have natural areas around. And gosh, that was when I fell in love with the outdoors, just kind of growing up in the hills. And then I went to Colorado State University and studied natural resources management. And then from then on, I fell into some really neat recreation jobs. And so I've worked in all sorts of various recreation fields, working with folks with disabilities and teaching skiing and climbing and backpacking. And my wife and I moved here in 2011, and really we fell in love with the island. We actually got married the year previous to that, and we kind of made a pledge to move here the following spring, and we've been here ever since. And the last 10 years I've been working at one of the outdoor adventure companies here on the island and managing a really big program, and all the while kind of keeping my eyes on the land bank and wondering when that job was going to show up. And I couldn't believe that it popped up just in perfect timing. I was ready for a change, and I'm just so excited about this opportunity, and everyone that works at the land bank that I've met so far. I'm just so excited to be part of this group, and just overjoyed. The last 2 days have been a lot of fun, and I can't wait. I have so much to learn, and I'm so excited about everything, really. So thank you, everybody, for being part of this.
Fantastic. New year, new people. Exciting. Let's see, was there anything else to add to that? Thank you. Welcome to the new people. Goodbye and hello, Judy. Stewardship, we still have some, anything else to add on stewardship before we go to outreach and volunteer reports? Erin, beautiful stewardship report again. Okay, next would be Tanya for an outreach and volunteer report.
Here I am. So looking at the, yeah, I unmuted the volunteer. So for the, I have the action item to follow up with how to get our live recordings onto the county website, which seems like it should be simpler. But
you froze for a second.
Okay, can you
say it again? You said you had to follow up. You had to follow up.
The action item was how to get our Zoom recordings onto the county website. And it is in process. What I've learned so far is the way the county does it, they subscribe, or they have a subscription to something, I don't know what it stands for, APV capture. So they're set up in certain locations along the county to be recorded, and then it's uploaded. But it seems if I can get our Zoom recordings, which go directly to my computer, into something like YouTube, then the IT department can post it to the website. So that's the next step. Is I'll be Googling how to get that onto YouTube. I think it should be easy enough. It's probably just an MP4 that needs to be transferred. So that's in process. I also see that I have discussed public virtual meetings on each island, but that might be more of a commission. I think I'll just bring it up. I know that we talked about a public forum, and that was going to come back as a agenda item. And if I remember correctly, the idea was perhaps the commissioners on each island would have a, like Lopez, a Zoom forum, or what I would call a cafe clutch, or a meeting. And so if I can help you, if that's still the case, I'm happy to help facilitate that. Whether it's getting you Zoom links, or if we have to expand our Zoom subscription, I think it is, we can look into that. Just need to know for sure if you want to do island by island or something different. And then I can also give an update for the communications committee. We met a week ago, this week. And so some of the things we worked on, I'm gonna look at my notes. We did review our current forms of communication, and then had a nice discussion about future content and a calendar. And out of that came a great suggestion from Sandy, which some of you may have noticed. I know Tom Callan did, thanks. Or I think it was Steve Olvey who mentioned that the Zoom link is now on our agenda that's posted. So folks can visit the week before when the agenda gets posted before the meeting, the Zoom link will be on there, and you should be able to just click through. We'll still have the waiting room, but I think it'll keep us safe from the bots that we had to fight off before, and still be able to have the public enter easily.
Thank you. Yes.
Sandy?
Yes. Go ahead, Brian.
If I may, Tanya, I think that I probably proposed having the local forums on each island. And we talked about that way back, I think at the 2019 annual retreat. So that obviously before COVID came down. We're in a different situation now. And it occurs to me that gives us a kind of a different opportunity. And now that we're having Zoom meetings, it's easier to do. It's easier for the whole commission to attend and listen to local comments on each island. So I would propose that we start there and worry about the in-person meetings as a separate item later on, but that we start with having Zoom meetings, and let's say I'll propose at least one meeting a year focused on each of the islands, and that we publicize that much as the CART publicized, and we publicize the last night's CAFELT meeting, which was really well attended and successful in that sense. So if we do that and announce it well in advance to each island, I would also propose that we move at least as a trial and as an experiment, that we move each of those, that one meeting a year, to a late afternoon or evening slot where more people would be able to attend. And that would be a regular land bank commission meeting. So say one meeting for each of the islands per year for starts, in the evening via Zoom. That would be my proposal to start that out.
So if I'm understanding correctly, your suggestion is a countywide land bank commission meeting or forum, or not just like we talked about at the last meeting where the commissioners would have like Lopez that do with the library. I don't know if you had a chance to watch one of those. It's still on. I didn't. I meant to, but I didn't.
Yep.
Okay.
That's opportunity for the whole commission to attend at a regular meeting, but one which would specifically focus on activities or opportunities on that particular island.
Okay.
So, yes, Sandy, what I would like to see the communications committee come back with the recommendation on how often, is it countywide, is it this, and come up with, you're mapping out our plan, our communications plan, what we're doing, and we've been adding new ideas to it. I'd like to maybe by next commission meeting, maybe we can bring forward those ideas and the communications committee make a recommendation to the whole commission on how those meetings would go down. Does that sound okay?
I agree with that. That sounds good.
Okay. All right. Anything else on your outreach, public outreach, volunteer? Okay, great.
Those are the highlights.
Tanya's doing a great job. Thank you, Tanya. Next on the list is discussion of 2019 retreat, action items and goals. Lincoln, you wanted to lead that?
Sure. I prepared the memo, which presumably you've all got, just to outline what the action items were from the retreat and where we are with each of those. I don't think I'm going to go through them one by one. Obviously, the retreat was in December of last year, and the world changed quickly after that. So a lot of these actions have been impacted by the COVID situation. And yet we still have gotten a lot done. I am actually just going back to the whole question of outreach. One of those items was to have town hall meetings. So we're coming back around to that, maybe in a different format, which is great. And also just talking about the recommendations coming out of our quick analysis that we had done, or assessment that we had done of the way we communicate. And we've done some of these things. So you've got those recommendations. There were more than this made. If anybody else who's read that report wants to chime in, that's great. But certainly we're doing some of these things, well, more than others, but really this focus on presenting information in a different way. We've worked on, for example, updating the website and changing that, and also updating the way we present information in the annual report, and using more graphics. And I think really going forward, doing a lot more with video because we have the potential to reach a lot more people in the county than we do with in-person meetings or field trips or things like that. And we might as well take the opportunity while we're in this situation to just get cranking on that. Tanya, you may have something to add since you met with our new videographer the other day.
Yeah, so during the power outage, I still met with a gentleman, Michael Noonan, who has experience. He is a PhD and a professor. He's done some, I would say, documentaries focused on animals and conservation, but he's become a hot ticket item around here. So we're very lucky. Doug made the introduction, and he's willing to help us with a very nice video. He's behind he's helped the Preservation Trust with some of their shorter videos. So if you've seen one of their Just a Moment videos that they've posted, those are with the help of Michael. And so we're in the beginning process now of putting together what kind of format that will look like. I may have to change my voice, so I'm gonna have to start practicing speaking much deeper. You guys can be my audience here. And so we'll see. It's just the beginning stages, but he may want to talk to some of you commissioners. So if that's the case, please let me know if you don't have the time, but more than likely it'll just be a quick email connection, and he's looking for examples of, I think, what your interpretations. I shouldn't speak for him, but I think it's going to be really great. He seems very excited. He's very animated, and we may be entering something in the Friday Harbor Film Festival. I really don't know. I mean, he's got big ideas, so more to be revealed, but that's the beginning of it.
Tanya, is that a general video introducing the land bank? Is that?
That's the concept. Yes, something that would be useful. I think general outreach purpose, sort of a nice way to explain visually who the land bank is, what the land bank does, and something that we could use for presentations and yeah.
Yeah, I think part of it, Sandy, is Tanya, you can relate what Michael's reaction was to our mandate.
Oh yeah. He's a professor. He did not like the sentence at all. He'd like to rewrite it. Too many commas, conjunctions. This doesn't make sense. He appreciates all we're doing. He just doesn't like the way it was written.
So part of this, though, is to actually come up with something visual where we can convey what's in the mandate without actually having to recite the sentence to do it. So I think that we'll see where it goes. I think it'll be fun. So otherwise, you've all been able to read through this memo, and I'm happy to take questions on it. I don't think I need to keep going on, but what do you all want at this point?
Well, I think there's a couple things on there that are going to be addressed more readily now. We've gotten used to Zoom. That's part of that communication plan, part of the island outreach things that kind of got put on hold, but now we know we can do them without being there in person. I think some of those goals will get met. And I think, one of the items that's on there is the Kaufelt Farm and our ag status or position on ag. So Brian's brought that up. I think that is something that we can start to move on. And if we're going to develop a committee that's going to get out there, it would be nice to have that committee in place as the recommendations or the next report comes from the Kaufelt group, the CART group to us. But I see movement on a number of these things with or without COVID, only because we've just gotten more familiar and comfortable doing things just differently. So I'm kind of amazed at what you guys have gotten done with COVID, actually. So I'm not unhappy.
So I have a question since we have time here on the agenda. One thing that came up in the retreat was about addressing, let's see, where is it? Has to do with climate change. Need for discussion about climate change and what the land bank's role is in addressing climate change at the local level. And that has come up several times in public comments. And of course, we're incorporating that in various stewardship management plans. But I was wondering if that's something that we should try to hone in on as a formulating a policy or a statement or a position, or working towards further clarifying that in a more general way. Obviously, how it would be handled at individual properties through soil and forest management is one thing, but in terms of a general position, this was not talked about at the time that the mandate was written and has become ultra important. And I'm curious what you all think about that. Okay.
Feel free to call on anybody, Sandy.
Well, I'm going to start by going to Lincoln on that. Your response in the report was that we're addressing it in individual reports, but what are your thoughts about taking on something broader and clarifying our values and positions?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. It cuts across the whole spectrum of the organization, really. And in fact, having Steve bring it up this morning, that it was very interesting to hear his take on climate change, which was really how we manage to have resources that we can use out here, and how the land bank can contribute to that. More typically, when people are thinking about climate change and climate change resilience, they're thinking about the landscape, the ecological communities, and how we approach that from a conservation standpoint. So there's both the issue of are we from an acquisition standpoint focusing on places which have the most potential for resilience in the face of climate change. And if you all remember, there has been quite a bit of work done on this around the country and in the Pacific Northwest, and you've seen the Nature Conservancy resiliency slide for areas out here, which basically show that the larger, more contiguous forested areas are the ones that are going to be most resilient to climate change. So certainly continuing to think about that when we are doing acquisitions is important. Similarly, with the properties we've acquired, we do definitely have some issues that we're going to have to address the way everybody who has a property is going to have to address. So we have a good bit of acreage, which foresters would describe as being overstocked, but basically a lot of third, fourth growth forests in dense stands. So getting in there and doing thinning is going to be a big question for us. It's going to be expensive without a doubt, and this is not an insignificant amount of acreage we're talking about. It's probably on the order of several hundred acres of properties that we own that we really need to do some more intensive management on.
I'll add two thoughts or a thought or two about that, which is, so from what I've heard, there's two ways of looking at climate change. There's mitigation and then adaptation. And mitigation is sort of the reduction of your organization's contribution to climate change, which has to do with reducing the amount of energy that you're consuming, how much fossil fuels you're releasing, all that kind of thing, which I don't know if necessarily applies to the land bank. It might apply if we were like Walmart or a large company that was consuming a lot of those resources. But that's one way to look at it, is just to have a policy about how we're streamlining our uses of those types of resources and contributing less to climate change than we normally would if we were doing something different. So that's one thought. And then the other one is with adaptation. It's how to create, like Lincoln's saying, a more resilient ecosystem and improving ecological function. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, I think, with creating connectivity, having larger areas that you're protecting, maybe more heterogeneity in the landscape, which has to do with like the acquisitions and management. But it can also have to do with like a cultural element too, where sort of, this is a little bit more abstract, but connecting people to nature and putting more emphasis on protecting those natural areas, planting more trees that help sequester carbon and that type of thing too. So the resiliency part, I feel like both of those things, the mitigation resiliency, we could have a statement about and a policy about. I feel like we, as an organization that acquires forested lands and manages them, we have more influence in that realm than we do for the mitigation part. But I feel like we could actually do something towards policy rather than just having a statement too. Those are my thoughts about it.
Okay. Yes, David. Oh.
I'd like to go back to what Lincoln was talking about with forest management and thinning, and ask what would it look like if we were to take that on aggressively? Like, does that mean we need more stewardship budget? Does that mean we need more stewards? Do we need a planning process? How do we approach that?
Almost certainly it's going to mean spending a lot more money on it. I think it's probably less hiring more people and more using more contractors or making different use of various conservation corps and other volunteer groups or work groups who we're paying to do that work. So it's definitely going to cost more money. I don't know that I have a per acre number on what we're talking about, but it can be quite significant. I think I would favor using more contractors and people outside the organization to work on specific projects than to increase our staffing to do it.
Do you feel like there are contractors in the county that can do what we need?
Well, it's going to be a challenge. I think with the conservation corps groups, that's a good place to start. because they get a huge amount of work done. Really, it's very impressive. With hiring contractors, there are some people who are good at this, but they're in high demand and they're very expensive. So we can do a certain amount with that, but we're going to have to scramble to figure out how to make this work best.
Jim?
I think we need to really buckle down and come up with some sort of statement for our organization and how we're going to approach this. But I think that we need to look at everything we do through the lens of climate change. And I think we as an organization in this county can lead by example. I think it is something that we should lead by example on, based on what we do. And I think climate change is one of those things that is going to be part of our lives, has been part of our lives, is going to be part of our lives even more in the coming months, days, months, years. And we need to figure out a way where we can really make a statement. I think it's our responsibility.
Thank you, Jim. Krista?
I thought, I have a vague recollection that we set aside some funding a year or more ago to do a trial thinning. Am I totally off in another planet or something? I thought it was like $100,000, or we had talked about, because Doug was looking at some kind of a project. Doug, does that sound right to you, or was that the hospital district that what I was thinking of that was doing thinning or something? I'm pretty sure we talked about this.
I think we had a really great, couple of meetings of dialogue, and the result of that was an interest in the commission in committing some funds. My memory was something along the lines of, $50,000 to $75,000 a year. Really, it's just been, a capacity issue on this side of the pond to be diving into that. The priorities that have been sort of handed down are get Zylstra Lake open for access and, things like that. So, if there's an interest in committing some funds, I think that's phenomenal. And you certainly have people who would be interested in utilizing those. There was an opportunity that you've heard about for some grant funding through the DNR, the Washington Department of Natural Resources was sort of the point on, and Aaron helped coordinate that grant application. I haven't heard, I don't know if anyone else has about that, but that would be definitely in line with what we're looking for. And hopefully that might come to fruition. And that was a sort of cost share grant. And I think we have some numbers that kind of came out of that, of what it looked like a little bit for treatments, per acre in some zones. And Peter might remember those numbers off the top of his head more than I am able to get to right now. But I concur with Lincoln's assessment that, it doesn't seem like something we want to increase staffing to do, but to really build the capacity. And I think doing that in two ways that were mentioned are really good, and that they can be interrelated. The first is working with these conservation corps, and I've personally been an advocate for getting this local conservation corps, like we have now with the Orcas-based one, established. So we get people who are here, they're trained in our particular situation, and over time that could help minimize our involvement, because we'll get a trained crew. And then coming out of that, hopefully we're building skills for people who might have interest in moving into doing some of this work in the private sector. And I think all of us have been sort of advocates as well of trying to help foster and build these roles within the community, as it's valuable not just for these public lands, but for private lands as well. And, you know, as a kind of accessory thing, you also start to help foster kind of a diverse community, getting different jobs and roles within the community out here. So I think we have a big role to play in kind of fostering all of those elements. So sorry, I think I went to a little bit more than your question about the money there,
Well,
didn't I?
yeah, I just wanted to make sure, because I know what it had been, we've been here and discussed this at, not at great length, but I know it was over a year or more ago. So I would like to kind of resurrect some of that without starting from scratch, that the commission was kind of on board with starting to spend some money and doing some of this work to see exactly what the pros and cons and difficulties and challenges were. So I would encourage that we bring that back to the forefront. And then the other thing, just throwing it out there in terms of the communication and outreach and everything, this is a topic to me that, especially in the Zoom society that we're currently in, that if we had an informational something at some point when the land bank has its ducks in a row and we're going forward with some kind of plan, that this could be a short presentation that's easily put up onto Zoom for anyone in the county to sit in on and just kind of get a feel for what is the land bank doing, what's their position on climate change. And even if we don't have a definitive one, if we're looking for ways to share and connect with the community, this is a topic that I think a lot of people would be interested in knowing what we're doing. Doesn't have to be long and involved, but it would be, especially with Zoom, people can sit in for half an hour and listen to Doug and learn a lot and get an idea of the challenges that we're grappling with and what we're looking to do. I think it would be a great tool.
We need a definitive. We've got to have a definitive position on climate change. That's not an option. I just think we have to spend money on it. I've done a lot of forestry management for my private clients, and you know, it's $2,000 an acre really to do remove dead and diseased trees, to remove fuel load on the forest floor, and those sorts of things. But I just think this is something we can't haphazardly or piecemeal participate in. We have to be all in on this.
Brian, go to Brian first, and then we'll go to David.
No, I agree with Jim entirely that we can't do it haphazardly. And to respond to Lincoln's comments about the costs involved, and particularly in thinning and wildfire mitigation. You're not hearing me?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I think that that's absolutely right, particularly if we hire contractors to do it. And I would suggest that prior to just going in and thinning probably by eyeballing it or seat of the pants approach, wildfire mitigation is a really specialized field, and we need a specialized assessment. I spent 6 years doing a wildfire mitigation assessment at East Bay Regional Parks in Wickham. And you really need expert advice on what the wildfire potentials are, where to thin, and so on, so that you can target your money and your efforts correctly. Having said that, I really have very little understanding of what the wildfire potential is here in the Northwest, and particularly in the islands. People don't seem as worried about it as they are in California. But you need to consider things like, where are our properties where wildfire is likely to spread into residential areas? which areas are feasible to thin, which areas can be left. So it's a big deal, and I think we really need to take a careful look at assessment and planning before we have any action on it.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I'm hearing complete agreement by everybody that we need to move forward on this. I think the simplest way to express that would be to put a line item into the stewardship budget that's climate change mitigation. And that could have sub items. One of them could be thinning. I think that we need to talk about soil health. I think that's what one thing that Steve Olvey is talking about when he talks about resilience and local, being able to depend on our own resources here. If we have something in our budget that says, I mean, we can't do anything unless we do that, can we? How are we addressing climate change if we don't have a budget for it?
Great, good point. Miles, let me get to you next. Peter, you wanted to make a comment about what's been said?
Yeah, I mean, so there's the policy side of things, but just to answer, it sounds like there's maybe not awareness of some of the assessment going on already. I mean, I think, we're about 2/3 of the way through a forest health assessment on turtleback, goal of which is to develop prescriptions focused on fire risk management and ecological health. So, I mean, I would propose that we do a programmatic approach, just a portfolio-wide assessment, figure out how to contract it efficiently, try to get the cost down to a reasonable level, figure out what level of detail we need, and just do the whole system to help us prioritize where the risks are, and then work our way through it over the next 20 years, probably. Like Jim says, it's a couple $1,000s an acre, but that's so variable based on topography and access, and and we do have an aging local logging population, sort of traditional loggers who are going to age out, before too terribly long, are still available and active in addition to the crews, and through some combination of, turtleback, for example, is in the FSC program. There could be pre-commercial thinning, commercial thinning on top of, crew-based work. So, I think, we just need to figure out, we need to have the assessment done first. And I would argue the whole system would be a good way to go.
Okay, Miles?
Well, I would say that managing our lands for climate change resilience is the same as managing our lands in the absence of climate change. Like good management of forests, the good management of natural lands is the same with or without climate change. I think that the emphasis just changes. And it would make sense to do something like Peter's talking about, where you have sort of a overall plan prior to going in and starting to cut or thin or whatever. I think I would rather see funds dedicated towards the plan and the policy first before we dedicate funds towards implementing, because I think the forest management that we're currently doing is working towards that. It might not just be as a big a priority as it should be.
Okay, any other commissioners to comment before we? Yes, David.
So Peter, you're saying that somebody's doing an assessment at Turtleback. Who is that?
It's Rain Shadow Consulting, Carson Springer and staff. And in this case, it's being funded by the Stewardship Endowment that's managed by the Preservation Trust. But I put in a request and we did a contract, and they'll hand us a report that includes recommendations and cost estimates, a ranked kind of list of areas that we should work on first and different approaches.
So what's the time frame that it takes to do something like that?
It was supposed to have been delivered by the end of 2020, but the lead on it had some family health crisis and ended up having to go to Colorado. So she's still working on it, but it's become more of a team effort and just delayed it a bit. So they've collected the initial data. Now it's the kind of ground truth and recommendation development phases.
I have similar, I also work with Carson Springer and Rain Shadow Consulting, and I think they do excellent work, although they really are sort of the only go-to organization with the professionals, professional, designation. I mean, Carson's an arborist and he does an excellent job, but I've also experienced some delays in getting some work completed because of COVID or other family emergencies or equipment breakdowns and that sort of thing. But and also I know that Carson constantly has to prioritize things because the county, besides us, the county also uses his services significantly.
So if I could put let's move on from the specifics of who the contractor could be, but find out, are we in consensual agreement that we'd like to have all of our forest lands assessed like Turtleback is, so that we could then go to a next step of a plan based on priorities? Is there consensual agreement on? Yes, Brian, can't hear you.
What Peter is outlining is the right approach.
Yes.
And just to be clear, what's the assessment of the forest that we're agreeing to assess?
We are assessing for fire risk, is that correct?
And ecological health.
Fire risk and ecological health.
Which do tend to go hand in hand on some levels.
They do. We do have a different focus than like a Firewise program, where it's exclusively about mitigating fire risk. In that we're also very interested in maintaining ecological systems and integrity. So where a Firewise program might clear a lot more of the understory or get rid of a lot more of the dead wood, we'd probably push more to retaining as much of that as we could, just because that's its habitat.
Yeah, I would just clarify that, yeah, the fire risk is not the primary driver of the Turtleback assessment. It's
forest health,
ecological health, of which, fire risk is a part, but that's not the driver there.
Okay, David.
And just at risk of, bridging something into a more controversial subject, we've been having some very preliminary conversations about the role of some invasive species and some native species for climate resilience. And one of those really is deer, and the potential impact that they are having in terms of composition, structure, and biodiversity kind of across all terrestrial habitats. And I think there's still some information that research-wise it would be really useful for us in making some decisions, including some of our policies around hunting. So that's another area that might be interesting to put some resources and perhaps in collaboration with other terrestrial managers. So.
Okay, David, last comment that we can.
Yeah, so I guess I hear there's a little bit of scarcity of the expertise needed. If Rain Shadow is the only game in town, not, I don't know, I don't want to say they're not timely, but it sounds like there's a little bit of a struggle to get what we need.
Well, the other option is to bring people in from the mainland.
Right.
So I would like to leave those discussions up to staff to figure out who and what our options are, but ask that, do we need a motion in order to? Yeah, I don't think so. So the consensus is we are all interested in forest health ecologically. Climate change is what took us into this discussion. So all commissioners, we haven't heard from Doug, but we are in favor of stepping up our game. I am in favor of committing. We have a stewardship, we have a fund there. There's grant money possibly available. We might have partners, but whatever the cost is, we need to take it seriously and be committing to do it. So I would say give staff a green light to figure out getting assessments on our other parcels and putting together a plan that we can look at and decide how to commit the funds. Is everyone in agreement with that?
I'm in agreement with that. My concern is the amount of money it's going to cost for an overall assessment. So I would like to have, you know, in advance of going full bore, I would like to know some rough idea of what the cost would be.
So Peter, can you tell us what the cost is on the turtleback assessment?
Yeah, I mean, that's about $20,000, but I think it could be scaled, you know, to the whole portfolio. We could collectively figure out what level of detail we need. It might not need to be quite so detailed, you know, if we go to the big picture, but that's what it's costing for turtleback, you know, 60 turtleback plus turtle head. So.
Peter, would you be able to put together just a short proposal, like a one-page proposal, just outlining what it is you want to do and
sure,
kind of cover for the
I think I would,
plan?
yeah, consult with other staff, and then yeah, that's doable.
Okay, great, thank you.
Aaron had a question, it looks like.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Oh, just a comment. The terrestrial managers group that Lincoln chairs, Forest Health Initiative, has been on the agenda for a couple of years, and we're working through just to provide some assurance that we're part of a bigger picture here with the community wildfire protection plan, and there's preserves that we own that are identified among the top 33 priorities in the islands. This is getting reviewed by the Conservation District with support from the BLM. So just want to say, I think some of the heavy lifting is being done, and how we remain to be partners in that and help provide recommendations is, I think, will help solve some of our priorities. Clearly not all of our preserves have the same issues with forest health or what other metrics to show our focus on climate change. You know, maybe there's fresh water, there's other things that I think we can focus on, but in terms of fire and forest health, there is a community protection plan and some folks that are really focused on this.
Great, that's good to know. So going back to what we're asking Peter to do, consult with staff, give us your recommendations on, we don't necessarily need to look at what would it be to assess our entire portfolio. Maybe we focus on the priorities that have been identified. But at this point, let's move into executive session. This is the time of the meeting where the public will leave the meeting. We'd be going into executive session to consider the selection of a site or acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood of increased price. That's RCW 423110. And then we will come back into session at 11:25 prior to adjourning the meeting. So if you're a member of the public, please disengage. So there's just two that I There's a San Juan Island on here. I'm not sure who that is.
The other one is
That one's
Amanda.
gone. Okay, the call-in is Amanda.
The call-in is Amanda.
Okay, then we're good to go.